course, we will be able to complete that. And then we will address the third phase, which is the water line from the south side to the Hatton River Zone.
And we do that. That's the next plan.
That was all I had.
We have a couple of agreements already with Sunrise Water Authority, so they seem to be amenable. So it would seem to me that we're not going to have any serious problems going forward getting another agreement with them. Certainly, it should be a cooperative and professional relationship. I don't see why getting that next funding phase or agreement, I guess IGA amendment should be a problem. If I understood correctly what this basically does is this is the least expensive way that we had available to us to get service to the Redlands area in general. You could build a whole new system, you could buy the old system, or you could basically do this wheeling process, and this was by far the least expensive way to provide that service. Am I basically correct on that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions? So on was the next one.
I'll be taking the ball. Just to introduce myself, Adam Bjornstead, engineering manager. Here to talk about agenda item 9B, which is an update on the emergency power and electrical upgrades project, or the generator project, as we call it, at the water treatment plant. I wrote a pretty extensive, much like Bob, amendment write-up, and I just wanted to hit a few of the summary points, and not go into any great detail on them one of them. But where we are right now, we did a engineering study back in 2010, 2011, and our consultant, Conduct Engineering, recommended some electrical upgrades at the treatment plant. There's some vintage equipment out there that we would need to upgrade before we connect our generator, which we purchased back in 2006. So in just about a year ago, we contracted out for construction manager, general contractor services, and we selected Oregon Electric. Began the design in about January, and had just a couple of items I want to go through in the past year. Just real briefly, the PGE DSG agreement was signed in February of 2012, and that's a main component of the project where PGE is partnering with us to maintain and operate the generator long term. What they get out of it is right of operation. Should there be surplus power in case of an emergency, or they can operate it in non-emergency times. We have first right of use during an emergency to use the generator. The good thing about it for the district is that PGE takes on all the operation and maintenance costs, including fuel, including replacing filters, batteries, all the things that are associated with the generator. So it's a very positive agreement for CRW. As well as PG contributing some to some of the construction costs to build the system. In June, we reached about a 60% design completion with the contractor. In September, we had a major milestone where we went through a pretty in-depth process of selecting some critical components related to the switchgear, which is basically the guts of the system from the generator to the plant. That moderates and controls the power. And then currently, this month, we've reached a 90% design complete stage. We also, and I didn't put this into the write-up because it was just breaking news last week, we finally got the air quality permit from BDQ from the state. That's a one-year permit that will be annually renewed, but that's very good news. We're also looking to amend the Conduct Engineering Professional Services Agreement, and again, Conduct is our electrical consultant on this project. They're not associated with the contractor. The contractor has their own design engineering. We have Conduct in place to assist us with the electrical design, not being electrical engineers. We, as a district, brought in a consultant with significant experience in that. What this amendment is for is just to add some design time to their contract. The design is taking longer, as I shared actually back in September. Design is taking a little bit longer than we had planned with the contractor. So kind of at this point is their agreement expires at the end of this month, and we're planning on amending that agreement. And again, it's just a time extension. We're going to extend it into June of next year. And no dollar changes at this point meant. So the request is, the recommendation is that we amend that, amendment 2 for additional time. What I did share also back in September was that there may be additional costs associated with design for Cundip's part, and then they're assisting us to work with the contractor through the design phase. Since the design phase is taking a little bit longer, there may be some additional design costs that will come forth in a future amendment. And that amendment would definitely go before the board, being a financial amendment. And then just a couple of other dates. Projecting in February, we're expecting design to be good and done. And then in June is when we're looking at the major start of construction. We have done some initial construction work out there right now, including some minor relocations of water line and hydrant that needed to be moved prior to the electrical work at the generator site. And then we're looking at final completion. I put December, but that would be, in my mind, final project completion. We should see a commissioning process between the generators up and running. We have all the upgrades done at the low lift, probably more like mid-fall, October. Again, these are projections. So, just really quick, and I apologize that I don't have any labels on this drawing. Just real quick, a site view. This is the water treatment plant existing. Operations, facilities over here. And then all the dashed or lighter lines and stuff is proposed. So right here, kind of in our south lawn area, is where the proposed generator facility will be placed. And then just a dash line, new electrical service going to the plant. And then new electrical going all the way down to our intake, the low pump station down near the river. So really pretty significant overall project. I think I shared in there, again, just that the overall budget is roughly $3 million, just over that. And it's a multi-year project, so this will also make it into the upcoming budget cycle, since it will be continuing on.
Go ahead.
After hearing the insurance report, what kind of shielding is going on with all that wiring in the event of flood or earthquake?
Good question. Really, as far as shielding goes, electrically, there's not, it's not introducing a lot of risk because of the nature of the conduit and the wire. A lot of it is direct buried, large gauge wire. Certainly down at the low lift is, as I think Jeff Griffin mentioned, the greatest risk is down there historically. So the fact that the equipment that we're upgrading at the low lift, the motor starter units, the equipment that tells the pumps to run on and off, is going to be new equipment, not the 20 or 30-year-old equipment that we have now. Those will be upgraded in a safety sense.
Thank you.
Do you have any plans for funding?
Yes, the current project, if that's your question, Mr. Chair, is funded. The last budget cycle, or the current budget cycle that we're in, we have identified a significant portion of the project being completed. This project also was a carryover from last year's fiscal year, so we had some design dollars and money that were spent last year. We're in the design process right now, so we are under a design contract with the hopefully future contractor and our design engineers. So there are dollars being spent in this planning and design phase right now. And then as far as construction goes, that money essentially will carry over. We will put it into the next year's budget for the bulk of construction.
Can't wait to see it running. It's been a long time. It was sitting there in 2007 when I got here.
I heard you kind of mention under your breath that the design crew might come back for an extension and more money.
That is correct.
What board do you think would approve that?
Well, we'll definitely bring it before the board and let you examine that and then make that decision. So.
And the extension our fault, or is it all theirs?
There were some issues up front that certainly we could have, in the RFP process where we identified the design components, there were some things that we could have clarified more. There's also some of the things along their side in the industry that they're used to. Their thoughts on design or their abilities to run a project in this way as a CMGC, which is really more in depth up front, not as a traditional contractor that's just out there building. Our expectation was them taking that design role, which they are doing. It's just taking them longer to do that.
Ken?
I don't have a problem with the fact that you might need a time extension.
Sure.
I guess the question, I think what the real question is, and I didn't get quite from what you said, the answer to that, why would it cost more than the original bid for the design? I understand why they need more time, that's okay, but what would be the reason they need more money?
Let me clarify again. There's really two entities that we're working with in the design. There's the contractor, Oregon Electric. They have their own engineer. They have stated, and we've met with them a couple of times, working through this. They have stated that they're willing to get us up to the 100% construction-ready design without any more expense to us. Where what I mentioned previously about a possible additional cost was with Conduit Engineering, who we hired separately to assist the district with oversight of the contractor's design, because they're an electrical engineering consultant. They bring expertise to the table that would help us make good design decisions. So the additional cost that may come would be for the additional time that they're spending because of the overall increased design schedule.
Is that just a little bit more clarification? There's a couple items that have come up. When the contractor did this as a CMGC, he took the opinion that we wanted the least expensive, not cheap, but the least expensive project. We look at it as water people said we need a facility that will basically almost bulletproof. We have to have that facility operational at a drop of a hat. Our consultant looked at that, said those are okay components for maybe a warehouse or for other type of work they are used to doing. But we looked at it and said we wanted it to be upgraded. We need better than what they offered us. So Conduct went through 2 iterations of looking at the switch gear for us, talking about it, going through it. Those cost, that cost money to do it, and we got a better product, I believe. The other item that is new to the board, we've talked about the flash, our arc flash issues, which is new in the, I'll say it's being finally addressed in the industry. It's been on the boards as a permitting and a design issue for about 10 years, 12 years nationally. Most companies and design firms are not even considering that aspect of design issues in both construction and design. Conduct brought back to the table because they are aware of those requirements, brought it to our attention, and we implemented and asked for those design additions to make sure that we covered the future code. Those are the type of costs we're talking about, of additional costs that as we got into the design, the scope grew from our consultant.
That answers the question. As you got into it, the scope grew because you were looking at a higher quality system than you initially started with.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Really, there was a change Mr. Chair, from 2010 to 2012, when we hired the contractor, in the sense of the code changing, we brought in arc flash, more safety concerns that we really wanted to address. It's an opportune time. We're doing a full-scale electrical upgrade.
I have a hard time with engineer talk, but if you get to the, you cut to the chase part, I got it. So, thank you.
That's the reason I asked whether it was their fault or our fault. When I was on the county commission, we used to wear a button that says no change orders. I wanted to notify you ahead of time what kind of trouble you might be in.
That's okay. Change orders.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
I wonder, this was in a previous, in one of our previous items, but there was this follow-up on the donation of assets that goes back a couple of years.
Yes?
And knowing how bureaucracies can forget things from a couple of years ago and let things fall through the cracks, and I know that this didn't fall through the cracks, and it was like, I wanted to just say thank you for being on top of it. I just thought,
We have several of these we have been chasing for 3 years.
okay.
The town center is another one. We will be bringing to you in pieces because of the complexity of foreclosures and other things that have gone on over there.
It's just easy for those kinds of things to just disappear, and that it didn't was noted.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
Your management report.
Yes, as you know, the manager's report is an informational report, and this month it's pretty short. I think we've had several meetings kind of back-to-back that kind of makes an opportunity here to make this one somewhat shorter. The first item is that, and I know there was some commissioner concern about it, was the GIS planning workshop that we have engaged in with Sunrise Water Authority, our staff and their staff. And essentially, what we have been doing is looking at our GIS system to see if we had opportunities, or have opportunities, where we can share that resource with a neighboring water district. And what we want to do is, if you look at under C1 versus C4, and tie that in with our accounting system, we also believe that there's an opportunity either within the existing system that we have, or maybe a modified system that might be offered by Tyler Technologies, for us to also share resources there as well. And so both of these meetings was really an opportunity to kind of go through the exercise to begin the discussion to see if those opportunities could be realized. So that's what went on there in both of those. The
Yeah, I have a little trouble reconciling this level of activity with your earlier response that you were just holding general discussions. That response came back, you know, this is pretty heavy duty stuff. And when you're talking about setting up an enterprise system, I know you've already supposedly set up a quote server farm. That's what you said.
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Well, at one point you said we have a server farm. Well, I'll find it for you if you can't remember. And so, we have a lot of sunk cost in this stuff, in the information systems that have been implemented in the last few years. And so one of my concerns is to be sure that whatever we do going forward, if we're gonna share all that sunk cost with somebody else, that our expense gets amortized. And we get paid back in essence. We're not just giving it away.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Holloway, every memorandum of understanding that we have with Sunrise Water Authority is a memorandum where they are paying us for the use of those resources. The lab services, MOU, they pay us on a sample-by-sample basis. And to the extent that we have other equipment and those kinds of assets that they would borrow, they are also responsible for that. So it is an opportunity for us to look at a lot of these systems that in some cases are overstated to our need because of the amount of investment that's put in place, to see if we can better utilize them. And so that's really what the discussion is all about. The backbone to an enterprise network is really kind of going through the discussion, go through the planning to make sure that you're dealing with a common data set. Those really, so far, have amounted to one series of meetings for 2 days, which is the GIS planning meeting that we had. And the meeting that we had about Tyler, I believe that was a 1-day meeting.
Just 3 hours.
3-hour meeting. So we've had 2 days and 3 hours worth of discussion.
Joseph?
Yes.
My concern with the earlier IGAs and the proposed 190 and anything that you propose doing here is that the board has never received any financial information about it. There's no information to establish that. I'm not suggesting the pricing is wrong, but the board has no information about it. Lab, we already have Sunrise using our GIS system, and you know, we may have them using other systems. I am not comfortable with no information coming back to the board as to the financial underpinnings of all of this. You know, if they're paying us $30 an hour or whatever it is for lab, I have no basis for knowing whether that's a reasonable amount or not. And I was very concerned because we didn't even know about it when it happened. We being the board. That's what I want to avoid.
Yeah.
Well, my understanding is that the board has delegated to the general manager, both in our policies as well as in his contract, the right to negotiate contracts on our behalf up to $50,000. We have 2 agreements that I know of with Sunrise. One of them was reported on May 12th, 2012, the other on July 14th, 2012. They're listed in the contracts log on page 4. I'm sure if you want a copy of the contracts, that management would be happy to provide them for you. And then on February 7th, 2012, those contracts were mentioned in the general manager's goals under items E and F. If he negotiates an agreement with Southwest or Sunrise for additional contracted services, I'm sure that we'll be notified of them once that process is done and we actually have a contract to deal with or an agreement to deal with. But in the meantime, it's just discussions. I would say let them discuss and see what they come up with, and if we come up with something that we can use, I'm sure that it will be properly provided to us, and maybe a copy of the contract and the agreement before the agreement's actually signed, that can be done. But they followed the process up to this point with that organization, so I don't see any reason why they wouldn't continue to do so.
The general manager does have contracting authority up to $50,000, which personally I think should be reduced. Nonetheless, this is a different kind of situation. This is applying, putting in essence CRW resources into something without having any idea whether the return that we're getting is an appropriate return. So to me, it's inadequate to apply simply a $50,000 label to it. Our GIS system has cost, I believe, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. And so what I'm saying is I get very concerned when I find out about these, which I generally do after the fact, from Sunrise's board minutes, rather than it having been brought to the CRW board with the financial support for doing it.
Well, it's being brought to the board as discussion. There is no information to date available. There's no agreement, there's no numbers, it's discussions.
Right.
I think it's making mountains out of molehills at this point. Now, if there's something that that is going to cost the district money or involves a significant sharing of resources, I'm sure that the general manager will be bringing it to us and we'll have an opportunity to evaluate it. Again, the record shows that that's precisely what he's done in the past. Let's just, at this point, I think the board doesn't need to be involved in it. Let's wait until there's something to look at. Right now, all they have is discussions.
I would just point out
That's all.
that this didn't come up until I read about it in the Sunrise Minutes and asked the questions, so I rest my case. I do have, speaking of contracts, Mr. Moore skipped over his tabs A and B, and I see that he has entered into a contract with Wilson Hiregood, hiring them as a safety coordinator. And as Mr. Moore knows, I like to have copies of all the contracts, particularly interested in this one. So would you tell us about that, please?
Mr. Chair, first of all, I'd like to remind the board here that both Commissioners Holloway and Commissioner Sterling had asked for copies of all contracts dating back to 2008. And those copies were made available to both commissioners. Included in those copies were the memorandums of understanding with Sunrise Water Authority. The specific contracts log that you see in the folder here, I believe that there was a question about which one, Wilson Air Guard. And this is an area where we had a part-time permanent position in our engineering department. And that position was budgeted at about $44,000. And what we did in order to save money, because we knew that this was going to be a short year, for $24,000, we negotiated an agreement with Wilson Air Guard, to provide risk management services for the organization. That contract was entered into, like I said, it's $24,000 a year versus $43,890 that we would have paid had we filled a position on a permanent basis. And really the intent was to see if we could do or provide these services more cheaply. And we're about a few months, I think we entered into it in September, and we're a few months into that, and we expect to be able to evaluate that at the end of this year to see if in fact the savings that we thought we could realize were in fact realized, and whether or not there's been any degradation in service. So we do have a copy of that contract, as Commissioner Holloway has asked for. I have it here in the binder, and I brought him here tonight to give her a copy of it. So that's what that's all about. And as you know, we didn't have a meeting of this board from September until, what, a couple weeks ago. And so this is our first real full report, and therefore it might provide.
If I may, Chair Sullivan, those contracts are supposed to be reported to the board and copies provided. And if I had had the copy, I would not have had asked the questions.
Are you done with your report, Mr. Moore?
Were there any other questions about the contract log since we jumped? Okay. Back to There were a few informational items because one of the things that I was going to talk about is the chair has requested that we use a new format for setting the agenda in order to expedite things. And we've utilized that for today's meeting, and I think that so far it's gone extremely well. And for the audience here, what we do now is we meet as a group and set the agenda. The board secretary, Mr. Hubbardston, contacts commissioners to see if there's additional input or items that commissioners would like to see placed on the agenda, and I do likewise with the staff. So as a part of Mr. Hubbardston's request to commissioners, there was a request by Commissioner Kalani for insurance agent of record information and expense information that was provided. We also have an additional copy. I believe Commissioner Holloway had asked for a copy of that. That's also in the binder. Commissioner Holloway had asked for insurance update. That happened tonight with Mr. Griffin's attendance. There was a question about the purchase of a laptop by ex-Commissioner Kemper. And I think there was concern about the dollar value as well as an expense item that was raised in her expense request. And really what that's all about is that when she was a commissioner, ex-Commissioner Kemper, her power cord wore out, and we did not have one here, and I believe she was traveling or something, or gonna travel, and basically went to Best Buy, bought a power cord so that she could operate her equipment. And that's what that purchase was all about. There was also a question raised by Commissioner Holloway on the Homeland Security grant. I believe in your packet there is information related to that grant. Essentially what it is that, as you know, well, the new commissioners may not know, but one of the things that we have been trying to do is to establish CRW as an emergency center for water for the region. A while back, we received a grant for a portable water supply system that's on a trailer. It essentially is a large bladder that one would fill with water with nozzles attached to it. So in the event of a catastrophe or an event, people would have a way to get water. And as in addition to that, as new Homeland Security monies become available, they are specifically for equipment. You may have read in the paper a couple of weeks ago where Lake Oswego received a water purification system. And what they're really trying to do is to make sure that all quadrants of the metropolitan area have this type of equipment. Because as you know, with most national disasters, water seems to be one of those first things that people need. And so because we have a treatment facility, Tualatin Valley has 2 of them. Lake Oswego has 1. I believe the city of Portland has 2 or 3, I can't remember. And because of where we're located next to the highway, the kind of equipment that we have that can haul the equipment if it needs to be deployed elsewhere, recognizing that we have the right of first refusal in the event of a disaster to use the equipment, we've been selected for one of the water purification systems as well. There is a schedule within your packet that tells you when we expect or anticipate getting that equipment. So that's, to answer his questions, that's pretty much what's going on.
By the way, that was all grant money from FEMA, was it not?
Yes, it's a Homeland Security grant, is what it is. And then there's some other pieces of ancillary equipment that we can. And I think there was a question about presentation of financials to the board, I would recommend that when we have our first work session, that we defer that topic for that type of a meeting. It's hard to have a discussion like that in this format. And the same with the request for legal invoices. Although we did provide a listing of costs that we've paid for legal services in the past.
If I
Several
may,
months.
Commissioner Sellers. In response to my request to Secretary Hubberston for copies of the legal services invoices from April 2012 forward, there was a whole lot of information put out that seemed extraneous and completely unrelated, and frankly, rather hostile. And so I want to make sure that it is clear to everyone that my request was for copies of the invoices from April forward, nothing more. And instead of getting them, you know, we got fluff. So I want to know if those invoices are going to be provided or not.
Mr. Soa, members of the board, it is true that additional information was provided, but it was provided at the request of other commissioners. The information that you were provided, Commissioner Holloway was the chair, that Commissioner Holloway was provided, she's received much of it, although she's correct that she hasn't received the information from, I believe May is the month that you're talking about, 12.
Well, crosses lines, if I get everything from April forward, that'll cover it.
As Commissioner Holloway might recall, that she had put in, that the prior board had a policy that if board members were asking for extensive information beyond those items that are on the current agenda, that the board members would be treated like any other public records request. Commissioner Holloway had made those requests. We had accommodated by having 12-hour, setting aside 12 hours and
If I may, Mr. Moore,
2 hours.
this was
per
on the
meeting.
agenda, and there's no need to go waste time going through all that stuff. Just yes or no?
The answer I was providing, but rather than get into it in a meeting like this, I'd defer.
I'll clarify one point, and that is the information that I requested was information, and it wasn't invoices, especially on anything that is currently under litigation. All I wanted to know was exactly how much money has been spent by CRW ratepayers on litigation involving you and Mr. Sterling and this board. Both what the ratepayers ended up having to pay directly and how much the insurance company had to pay directly as a result of that. And I got those as raw numbers, but are direct expenses, not indirect expenses. And they came up to, at least on the part of the ratepayers, about $200,000, and on the part of the insurance company, about $76,000.
And how much of, that's the reason I asked for copies, because I think you're going to find that the bulk of that is because CRW filed ethics complaints against me and litigation against me and former Commissioner Warren Mitchell, both of which failed. That's why I wanted copies of those. So my question still has not been answered. My question was just put to Secretary Humberston and subsequently forwarded on to President Soa, was for copies of those invoices. Now it seems to have turned into a very big deal. It shouldn't be.
We'll work on that, try to see if we can't get you that information.
Thank you.
Are you finished with your report?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
Okay, move on to the next item, which is business from the board. Commissioner assignment report. Anybody make a presentation?
I believe I have to make a report.
You submitted it in writing, didn't you?
I did submit it in writing. For the public's benefit, I'd actually been twice at Sunrise, watched their board meeting. The two basic issues of interest, one was they have a number of contracts with companies that provide cell service, and they have cell towers. And they're working on getting those contracts to be consistent between companies, and then looking at the possibility of expanding that concept throughout their district. I thought it was an interesting idea. We have a lot of towers on high hill, or a lot of tanks on high hills, and it might be something that we would consider looking into in the future. So I would give this to the general manager to put on your list of many things to do. But maybe that is something that would be of interest to us and a way of getting additional income and keeping rates down. The other issue that was kind of interesting was they had the city requested a reduction in meter size, and in that process, they pay for what's known as, I think it's EDUs or ERUs, I'm not sure if I got it right, but it's basically a unit of water measurement based on the size of the valves that are used. And of course, you pay so much money for each one of those units. If you're reducing the size, could you get a credit that could be used for other uses within their area? Subsequent meeting this week, they came to a conclusion on that I thought was rather good. The city would get these credits, and they would be able to use them on any other public project that they might have, which means that if they have a different park that they want to put in with a new water meter, that they wouldn't necessarily have to front the costs of an expensive meter because they have these credits available to them. I thought it was a good way for public agencies to work together. And those are the two major salient issues at their meeting, and that's the end of my report.
I saw a request by email that the C4 group, Clackamas County group, wants a, what is it, specific board member?
I can
Have you
explain it
had?
to you. Yeah, the water community has one seat on C4. And Sunrise, Oak Lodge, CRW, Boring, is that it?
Wilsonville,
No, of our group for Clackamas County. This is all just, Wilsonville has not been a part of it.
Well, there are about 30 members of the board there that they discuss various, most of is transportation situations.
Oh, yeah, I know what C4 is. I was just explaining to Commissioner Sola that the group here, the 4 water boards, each have a representative, and they select from their membership someone to represent them. It has been set up in a rotation, and so if the boring representative, I think, Ernie, are you up on this? If the boring representative isn't interested in the position, I would think it would simply rotate to the next one, but I believe Secretary Hummerston is our C4.
I am.
You're C4 representative.
That's why I
okay.
mentioned it, because I attended the last meeting.
So that's what it's all about. And so that group needs to, one way or another, provide a delegate for C4.
How do we get our person to be that person? Do we have to campaign or what?
No, it was set up in a rotation,
You have to be there.
previously
and then
agreed rotation.
You sit on the outside of the board,
Mhm.
and as an informational sort of person. And then, as time goes on, when there's a vacancy, then they'll appoint from those as representative for
With the
different
four.
entities.
And that person has a vote on C4. That representative represents water on C4.
But most of the one topic that they did discuss was the Longfield project, which we are involved with, but it was essentially they were discussing the transportation end of it as opposed to the water end. Yeah, but most of the work was, or the topics had to do with transportation throughout the county.
So the answer is, there is a rotation set up, already written into the agreement, And if Warren doesn't want to take it, I guess it goes to the next one. I'm not sure who that is.
Mr. Chairman, I think,
You know what?
at least when I looked at the notice, it looked like they had the next person in line, but the alternate had not been selected. And they were sending out the memorandum to ask the water entities to get together to decide who that alternate would be, or if they wanted to replace the person who was next in rotation, is how that notice was written.
Okay. Any other commission?
Yeah, I have a question. Mr. Moore promised us, as we put our budget together for this year, that Mr. Phillips would not be sitting in attendance at our meetings at, whatever it is, between $500 and $1,000 a night. And so my question is, that seems to have been reversed. Is that the case?
No, Mr. Chair, I believe I talked with the chair about this, and we had asked Mr. Phillips to sit through today's meeting, and then he will be contacted on an as-needed basis from today's meeting forward.
Thank you.
We got that handled.
Great. Good work.
The next item is scheduling a work session or a board orientation.
Well, we essentially have both.
Goodness sakes.
It's awful. Just hang it out. It sounds like there's nobody on the other end. At least it woke us up.
Not on the other end.
And like some other people, we didn't hear snoring.
The first item that we have is with the new commissioners, is to sit in orientation meeting per policy, to go through a more formal orientation period of, or meeting of not only the policies and procedures, but also a tour of the facilities, and also meeting with the various departments within CRW. And that's really at your leisure. I do believe when we talked about this a little bit earlier, we were looking like sometime in February is where, because of the other business that we had, that you all were interested in maybe scheduling something then. And I don't know if that's still true or not. So now would be probably a good time to talk about that.
Chair Sella, if I may. February is the SDAO annual conference. It's here in Portland, so it's easy to attend. And I think that that would be very beneficial. You know, I learn something new every year, even though I've been at it a while. I think it would be very beneficial for all of the board. And I would suggest that it might be better to hold the orientation after that so that we know what's already been covered, so it doesn't have to be repeated. Also at SDAO, it's in-depth. You know, you spend half a day on each subject.
We have, it's scheduled, the SDAO conference is scheduled, Mr. Chairman, from February 8th to 10th. And I think that may bump up against our February board meeting, so we may want to look at that. Let me look at my tools here.
No, I thought I was going to miss the February meeting and ask for a change, but it looks like I'm going to be able to attend the February meeting, but unfortunately, the weekend of the 8th, 9th, and 10th, I will not be available.
So the 8th is a Friday, and the 9th is a Saturday. So, and our board meeting would be a Thursday, so essentially, you're committed for 7, 8, and 9 unless you want to change those dates.
We're talking about the SDAO conference, correct?
Well, the 7th would be a regular scheduled CRW board meeting.
Aren't we second?
No. We're
It's
second.
14th.
I don't have, well, let me look at my calendar. Okay, so the 14th, so it doesn't conflict, so the 8th and the 9th are the previous Friday and Saturday. That's SDAO. So what we would need to know there is which of you intend to attend that session. We know that our board meeting is on the 14th, and the question would be, would you want to meet later in that month for a orientation meeting? Or would you want to defer until the following month?
Is January out of the question?
You could do January. So if we looked at can we have our listeners? If we looked at January, our board meeting is on the 10th, and we normally have our special meetings either, they were doing them on Tuesday, which would be the 22nd or the 29th of January.
We're doing them on Mondays, usually before the Monday.
We've done Tuesdays, we've done Mondays, because there was conflict, I believe, with one of the commissioners before. So, really, it's up in the air, really, in terms of how you want to do it.
Well, if it's January and a Monday, 7, 14, and 21 are all fine with me. Speaking for myself.
So 21 is the third Monday in the month?
Yes.
And maybe, let me look, yeah, it is a holiday, sorry.
No, that's MLK Day.
Yeah.
14th?
So we're into the 28th or the 14th.
How about the 28th? I have a meeting on the 14th.
The board?
28th is my birthday.
Big celebrate.
Oh, I intend to.
I'll bring cookies.
So am I hearing the 28th?
Sounds good.
All right.
Did you say the 28th?
Well, I was echoing.
Yeah.
No, I was saying not on the 28th.
Oh, not on the.
Not on the 20th, because it's.
Oh, I thought you said.
I thought you were saying, I thought you were just giving it.
Beverages, let me put it that way.
What, okay, the 21st, is that open?
Tuesday's the 29th,
On Tuesday?
and Tuesday the 22nd.
Either one's fine with me.
Commissioner Hallway?
Yeah, either is fine.
So the 22nd?
22nd?
Okay. And
What
that
time?
would, and that would, what, do you want to do daytime or night?
You're gonna tour?
Tour would be daytime, that would be for the orientation.
Okay, which one are we looking at now? Are we, or is this orientation, or is this like?
My recommendation, if you're gonna spend your time with orientation, that you might want to skip a planning meeting in January and focus on that. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, my understanding is we were talking about orientation,
Yeah.
and I would hope that we do, 3 or 4 hours desk work and then the tour. So we don't spend all day sitting,
Right.
if that's okay.
Yeah.
What time do we want to start?
What time would you like to start?
Anytime's okay with me.
10 o'clock, 9 o'clock?
9 o'clock? 9 o'clock work for you?
Yeah?
9's fine.
9 o'clock? You?
Yes, the 22nd.
Okay.
Okay. I think we're set. And then there's an OWAC conference.
Wait a minute. I just had another meeting at 9 o'clock.
That's why I like a paper. It's a lot easier.
No, it's still bad. The 29th, we can't do for some reason, is that correct?
No, we
can
just
do it the
kind of
29th.
defaulted.
How about
to
the 29th?
The 29th?
Yeah, at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Doesn't mean no paper, you can't erase it.
This is
Write
true.
pencil.
Okay. And the other announcement that we have, Mr. Chair, is the OWAC conference for Oregon Water Utilities Council which is the 2013 Legislative Symposium, and that's January 9th in Salem, for any commissioners who would want to attend.
Would you send us a flyer on that, or
We
something
can.
through email on that?
Yeah, we can.
Thank you.
Finally, we're done, except for one thing. We still have another slot for public comment from the floor. Anyone still want to comment? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cindy Lewis, Lowell from Milwaukee. Tonight, I just wanted to thank the board for the work that's been done today, and it's nice to see that there's some good organization coming together here. However, we still have a problem that many of us citizens are facing, and I'm concerned about the citizens that get involved with CRW and come and spend their time here on the advisory committees that are set up, and then are kind of like, not denigrated exactly, but little small comments are put out. And the one in particular is the rate committee. I've heard the last two meetings, this one and the last one, a comment made about the rate committee. CRW did not raise rates since 2008, which they raised their rates in a small manner. And from 2008 until 2011, there was not any rate increases at all. The work that rate committee did, comprised of the citizen members of that rate committee, was to sit and listen to FCS and get all that done. The comments I've been, get the work together to give to the board. The comments I've heard, and that other rate committee members have heard, is that this was a not legitimate type of a rate committee, or it was not correct in the process that they took. The outcome of that committee was delivered to the board for their decision-making process. The rates that got adjusted were adjusted by the board of this entity. It was voted on in unison and unanimously by that board. And so I would like to see that the rate committee members not be told by this board that they didn't do the work that this board set them to do. There were disagreements on that committee. It was not a unanimous decision that went forth to the board. And there was also some intervention attempted by certain board members that did not get accepted by that committee. That committee listened to the public. They had openings to have the public speak to them. And I want to make sure, Mr. Chairman, if you were given any other information that says that there wasn't public comment at those meetings, that you're aware that there was, so that you do not think that this committee met without any input from outside of it, and that they did the work that they were asked to do. We also have public members on our budget committee, and the work that's done by those 10 people every year, as you well know, is very intense since you served as chairman last year. I thank you for the time to talk to you today, and I would urge our citizens to look at the papers being sent around and remember where the problems have lied with this commission in the past, and make an attempt to correct that by signing the recall petitions out there. Thank you, sir.
Any more public comment? If not, we'll stand adjourned.